Today on Ag News Daily.
We're supplying the good microbes as far as the nitrogen fixers, and we're trying to target that rooting zone. We want to get our microbes living on the roots. That's where they get their energy from, and that's also where they're supplying that nitrogen, where the crop is going to take it up ultimately.
Well, welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. This is Tanner.
This is Delaney.
Yeah, I didn't know. Maybe we pick up more new listeners than we think.
I'm sure we have.
Introductions are probably a little bit nice there. As we look towards the weather, everybody's kind of starting spring softball and baseball, little league programs, and it's usually chilly to start off with.
It is track. They're getting itchy, though, to get out, get planting.
Yeah, we still have another strong weather system that will move through today and into the weekend. It's planning to bring some heavy rain and potential severe storms. While rainfall is helping ease drought conditions in the northern region, the south still faces a heightened risk of historic flooding, making field work nearly impossible. By Saturday, a significant flooding and flash flooding event is expected along the frontal boundary that stretches the lower Mississippi Valley into the Ohio Valley. Meanwhile, heavy wet snow will impact parts of the Dakotas and the upper Great Lakes region on Tuesday, potentially worsening into an ice storm and causing more recovery issues in northern Wisconsin. As we look ahead into that 6 to 10 day outlook, there's predictions with below normal temperatures east of a line from Texas to Lake Superior, while northwestern plains and much of the west will experience above average warmth. So a lot of folks I've been seeing on X and Snapchat sharing about this storm that's gone through. We have a lot of those tornado victims in our thoughts and in our prayers as well.
We do. Well, spring is certainly on the way, though, nonetheless, for Texas, as they're continuing to progress in planting progress. But ongoing drought conditions are forcing some farmers to rethink their crop choices. Agronomists say many may shift acres from corn to sorghum and cotton this year. In West Central Texas, Reagan Nolan, an assistant professor and extension agronomist at Texas A&M, says corn and sorghum acreage will be extremely limited due to dry conditions and depleted irrigation supplies. Noland also says it's a possibility for farmers to still plant grain sorghum through mid-April, but it's not likely unless it starts raining soon. Instead, many are expected to switch to cotton acres, Noland says, which can better withstand the ongoing drought. However, that sentiment doesn't necessarily reflect the latest USDA forecast in this week's prospective plantings report. The latest report, released on March 31st, shows farmers plan to plant more corn this year, up over 5% to 95.3 million acres, while cutting back on soybeans. If those numbers hold, this would be the third largest corn acreage on record since 1944 and the biggest since 2013. Soybean acres are also expected to shrink 83.5 million acres, down 4% compared to last year. Cotton saw the biggest decline, dropping 12% to 9.9 million acres. And lastly, all wheat planted for 2025 is estimated at 45.4 million acres, down 2% from last year. If realized, this represents the second lowest all wheat planted area since records began in 1919. So not seeing that cotton switch reflected yet.
Oh, it'll probably lag behind just a little bit. What's not lagging is the news around the tariffs. Tariffs continue to shake up the agricultural industry. New developments are impacting both the short and long-term futures of trade. On Wednesday, President Trump announced a new 10% across-the-board tariff, along with additional reciprocal duties that are targeting specific trade partners that include China, the European Union, Japan, and South Korea. Under this new policy, all U.S. trading partners will face the 10% tariff, but some will also see higher country-specific duties. According to the White House fact sheet, China will face a 34% tariff, the EU 20%, Japan 24%, India 26%, and South Korea 25%. Goods from Canada and Mexico aren't taxed as much as in the USMCA. Compliant goods do not face a tariff, and non-compliant goods will face a 25% tariff. The across-the-board tariff is set to take effect on April 5th, the country-specific duties following on April 9th. Agricultural industry leaders are voicing their concerns. Kip Eideberg, Senior Vice President of Government and Industry Relations for the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, warns the uncertainty in the trade environment could hurt manufacturers and their customers. Meanwhile, the European Union has already announced their retaliatory tariffs on U.S. farm products in response to previous duties on steel and aluminum. And in a recent Farm Journal survey, they found that over 90% of economists believe that President's tariff strategy will not benefit American agriculture in the long run. And I thought maybe we've got a headline read coming up, but I thought I saw that Case New Holland was suspending exports of equipment until they got a clearer picture on what their tariff impact was going to be.
Okay, I hadn't seen that one in the news, so thanks for bringing that to us. Well, of course, as we continue to watch those tariffs explode, U.S. beef exports to China have taken a major hit after Beijing allowed key export registrations to expire, blocking shipments from hundreds of American meat facilities. New government data shows a sharp decline in sales after China failed to renew export approvals for U.S. beef plants that expired on March 16th. Meanwhile, registrations for pork and poultry were updated according to traders and the U.S. Meat Export Federation. Adding to the strain, a tit-for-tat tariff dispute has raised duties on U.S. meat and other goods, making them less attractive to Chinese buyers and others. The trade tension further complicates relations between the two countries, which have been at historic lows in recent years. This uncertainty is putting a lot of deals on hold. U.S. Meat Export Federation spokesperson Joe Shulley says U.S. exports and Chinese buyers are hesitant to move forward with beef shipments, unsure whether the products will be cleared for delivery. As Shulley put it, quote, "Nobody wants to put products at risk, especially a fresh product like beef that if it sat there for a while, that would not be good for anyone."
Yeah, that's certainly something for us to continue to keep an eye on as everything progresses forward. Agricultural producers who have not yet enrolled in the Agriculture Risk Coverage, or ARC, or Price Loss Coverage, PLC programs for 2025 crop year have only until April 15th to revise their elections and sign new contracts. Both programs, administered by the USDA's Farm Service Agency, provide income support to farmers facing significant drops in crop prices or revenues, which we could see coming up this year.
Certainly, Tanner. Well, as we look at a larger exploding market, the adjuvant market is continuing to be predicted to grow. As we look at here a recent report, according to a report released by Global Market, this market is expected to grow by about 14% from 2024 to 2032. The growth is attributed to the increasing need for effective crop solutions. And with this growing global population and subsequent demand for food, the agricultural sector is under pressure to, of course, maximize crop yields. According to the United Nations, the world population will reach 9.7 billion people by 2050, just slightly lower than what we've been hearing there at 10 billion. But this means that food production will need to grow by about 70% to keep up with that growing population. Agricultural adjuvants, which enhance the effectiveness of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, play a crucial role in improving crop protection and minimizing environmental impact, according to that report. The rising awareness of sustainable farming practices further drive the adoption of these products, which will support market expansion. As we look abroad, Europe will drive significant gains in the agricultural adjuvants market between 2024 and 2032, supported by their region's advanced agricultural practices, stringent regulations promoting the sustainable farming, and its growing need for increasing food production. So it could be interesting there, Tanner, to see some new adjuvants hit the market.
It is interesting, the number of emails and flyers that producers are getting for companies that now have an adjuvant to offer. So I can see that factually those growth projections probably coming to fruition. Poultry remains an attractive option for consumers worldwide thanks to the improved economic conditions and high prices for other proteins. That is what is driving global consumption growth, which Rabobank predicts will increase up to 3% this year, according to the report released at the end of March. This marks the second consecutive year for above-average market expansion, boosting profit margins across the industry. However, we still have challenges that remain, particularly for U.S. producers that have been battling avian influenza, which continues to be a major concern. Additionally, tight supplies of parent stock and high hatching egg prices are limiting growth. Beyond disease risks, rising geopolitical tensions and increased competition are also pressuring global trade. The U.S. tariffs on imports and retaliatory duties on American poultry could escalate into a trade war, shifting international trade flows and having some effects there. Rabobank says that global traders should be prepared to respond quickly to these developments to be able to help those poultry producers in the markets ahead.
Well, Tanner, unfortunately, not a lot of positive sentiment in our news this week because farmer sentiment also took a major hit in March as concerns over agricultural trade and farm policy weighed on producers' outlook for the future. The Purdue University and CME Group Ag Economy Barometer dropped 12 points in March down to 140, which is down from the 152 number we saw back in February. This decline was driven by a 15-point drop in the index of future expectations and a 5-point dip in the current conditions index. Falling crop prices and uncertainty in trade and policy were major factors behind the decline. The Farm Capital Investment Index also fell by 5 points to 54, though it remains at its second highest level since June of 2021, so a little bit of a mixed bag there. Meanwhile, the short-term Farmland Value Expectations Index held steady at 118, just slightly below last year's level. And the Farm Financial Performance Index dipped 8 points to 102, but producers still expect better financial conditions this year compared to last year, even with tariffs and everything else going on. So maybe a little bit of a change there.
That seems hard to predict.
It does.
And we're already a couple of months into this year, but we'll continue to keep an eye out here. John Deere & Company filed an answer to the Federal Trade Commission's lawsuit alleging the tractor manufacturer holds a monopoly over its repair services. The FTC alleges that Deere & Company unfairly drives up costs and limits farmers' ability to repair their own equipment. But in the court filing, Deere's attorneys rejected claims that its business practices are unlawful. The debate over right to repair has been building for years with modern technology that it takes to fix equipment that is complex. Deere does offer repair tools for customers and independent shops, but the FTC argues it's inferior to the version available at authorized dealers, making certain repairs nearly impossible. The company acknowledged the existence of the two tools, but denied that one was inferior.
Nothing else may be the report there. That is it for now.
Yep, I'm sure we will see more developments in that as well.
Well, as planting season approaches, innovation in agriculture continues to take center stage, especially at the recent Commodity Classic, where we had this next interview. This week, we're hearing from Logan Woodward, product development agronomist at Pivot Bio, to discuss the crucial role of nitrogen in crop production and how new advancements are shaping the future of farming.
Well, we're super excited to be catching up with Pivot Bio this year at Commodity Classic once again, chatting with Dr. Logan Woodward of Pivot Bio, the product development agronomist with Pivot Bio. Logan, thanks so much for joining us this year at Commodity Classic.
No, thank you for having me here.
Logan, before we get into a little bit about what Pivot Bio is up to these days, let's start with a little bit about your background and how you came to be working at Pivot Bio.
Absolutely. So I originally started my graduate work at the University of Illinois with Dr. Fred Bilo and helped working alongside with Dr. Connor Sybil. And so I started my graduate work with some biologicals, including the original Proven in 2019. And so Dan Posen and Pivot Bio came to us and said we wanted to look at some of our new microbes and test it across many different nitrogen rates. We wanted to see how does it fare between 0 pounds of synthetic nitrogen all the way up to 200 pounds of synthetic nitrogen. So we had tested this across a handful of sites across a lot of different years. And what we consistently saw was increases in plant biomass as well as nitrogen uptake. consistently across all these N rates. So the other thing that we also wanted to look at too was isotopic nitrogen. We wanted to see where this additional in uptake increase was coming from. And we ultimately found it was from the atmosphere. We were getting nitrogen from the atmosphere. It was fixing that into gas from the air and supplying it to a plant available form right in that rooting zone where the crop needs it the most and when it needs it the most. So we were excited to see that because I think of it now as a third source of nitrogen for corn production. Our first source being the soil itself, what's mineralized from organic matter, and then the fertilizer we apply to the soil. So what happens if, inclement weather happens and we don't know where that synthetic pounds of nitrogen actually is and if it's available. So we can able to tap into that third source, being the air, to help relieve some of that variability across our fields.
Now, you're talking a lot on the research side and some of the trials that you were a part of, but when we look at crop nutrition on the nitrogen, what really is the baseline for producers? Like there's so many products on the market today. Give a baseline of what some of those products are and how Pivot Bio is very different.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are many different modes of action of biologicals and biostimulants. You have the living side and the what I call the dead side, or what the byproducts that those microbes give off. And so that's one difference. And then what makes us different compared to the other products out there is our patented technology through the gene-edited nitrogen-fixing bacteria. What's really cool about that...
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but can you break that down a little bit more for us, the gene-edited nitrogen bacteria? Did I capture that all right?
Gene-edited nitrogen-fixing bacteria.
Break that down just a little bit more for us, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So the in-fixing bacteria, they basically take into gas from the air. They break down that triple bond, which takes a good amount of energy, and then creates a plant available form as ammonia, right where those roots are at. And what the gene-edited thing is important about is some of the native and wild-type microbes, because I said earlier it takes a lot of energy to fix nitrogen. And some of those native microbes may take the path of least resistance, especially if there's high exogenous nitrogen in that system. And there is in corn, especially in corn production, because we're using synthetic nitrogen to ensure we have high yields. And so some of those native microbes may not necessarily be fixing in that system. But with our gene-edited technology, we can ensure that we're supplying a plant-available form right in that rooting zone where the crop needs it the most and when it needs it the most during the vegetative growth stages.
Logan, let's talk a little bit more about microbes. You mentioned native microbes. Break down for us, what are they, why are they important for what we're doing?
Yeah, there is a lot of different native microbes in our soil. You take a spoonful and there's just millions upon millions of different microbes there. Some are beneficial, some are actually negative and harmful for the crop with diseases and stuff. So as far as microbes out there, you have some microbes that are able to fix nitrogen. You have some that are able to solubilize phosphorus. So in our soil, there's phosphate complexes that are bound to heavy metal cations, and they're rendered unavailable. And some of those native microbes are able to release phosphorus and make that available for the crop. But then there's plenty of other microbes out there that do a lot of different things.
And so really, in essence, Pivot Bio is working to harness the good microbes and ensure that plant nutrient uptake, nutrient cycling, all those things are happening as they should and using those good microbes. Am I paraphrasing that?
In general, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we're supplying the good microbes as far as the nitrogen fixers. And we're trying to target that rooting zone. We want to get our microbes living on the roots. That's where they get their energy from. And that's also where they're supplying that nitrogen, where the crop is going to take it up ultimately. Exactly right.
So when a farmer is looking at their nitrogen management plan, how can this be implemented? Why does this matter when you're looking at that plan?
Yeah, so when you're trying to integrate products like Proven 40 in the grower's system, I think they complement synthetic fertilizer very well. We need to ensure we have enough synthetic nitrogen to ultimately maximize yields, but we also want to think about when and where we're applying that nitrogen fertilizer. I think all about efficiency. If we're trying to integrate Proven 40 in the system, I first talk to a grower and ask, what is your nitrogen fertilizer program? And I think about starting to potentially see where can we replace some of those synthetic pounds and replace it with biological pounds from our microbes. So I think about first taking out some of your least efficient and keeping the efficient pounds like in season. So that's some of the most beneficial tools for a grower in their toolbox. So I want to make sure we keep that in a system, but then maybe take out some of those, start to take out at least up to 40 pounds of those inefficient by then replacing it with biological nitrogen that may be supplying it right in that rooting zone.
Logan, speaking of grower conversations, we're at Commodity Classic. It's the premier event for growers across all parts of the U.S. What are some of the things you're hearing from growers related to Pivot Bio's focus on nitrogen, this management strategy, biologicals? Would love to hear some of your insight.
Yeah, been having a lot of good conversation with growers. We have a really solid base of folks here at the Commodity Classic. It's been exciting to talk with them. For the most part, I've been talking with a lot of growers about, have you tried our product? How did it work? And just talking about the successes that a lot of growers have had with us, and talking in general about their synthetic nitrogen program and seeing how we can integrate a product like ours in that system.
Maybe a quick follow-up to that, too, since you're in that science-based space, you've done a lot of the work leading up to now. How do conversations like this shape what maybe product or development you're going to be doing here moving forward?
Yeah, so what's really cool about my job is I do all on-farm strip trials with growers. So I typically work with pre-commercial products. And what's really cool is not only are we focused on the results as far as the yields, but we also want to talk with the growers and see, how well did this fit in their system? Did it plant well? Was there any issues there? And we just want to get that on their hands and see how they think that product is in general, just outside of the results. So just seeing their opinions, we take a lot of consideration into that as well, outside of just the yield responses, just seeing how well they can use it.
Absolutely.
Now, every year you look like you've grown every year in the biological market. 5-10 years ago probably doesn't look like it is today. Can you touch upon how much growth you're really experiencing?
We've definitely been seeing some really good numbers out there as far as acres, but the one thing that I'm excited about is some of the new products that we have coming down the line. We have a new product that we're soft launching this year called Proven G3. It is our third generation corn product. And we've ultimately added 2 new microbes into that system and adding 2 new additional modes of action. So just outside of nitrogen fixation, we're also looking at how we can improve on the root mass. So some of the new microbes we added into that product help increase root biomass. And I think that's beneficial for a couple different ways. So with a bigger root, that means there's going to be more area and more homes for our nitrogen fixing bacteria. So that's going to be able to have a better potential of nitrogen fixation, more in being fixed from the air into the plant. But also, I think it helped with late season. So what happens if the rain cuts off?
Yeah, late season stress.
Exactly. Yeah, if rain cuts off during grain fill, and then with a bigger root, we can maybe protect some of that high yield potential that we set earlier in the season.
That's just fascinating stuff. Is there anything else, Logan, as you're looking out here to 2025, you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, the big thing I want to focus on is our gene-edited nitrogen-fixing bacteria technology in general. The fact that we're able to ensure that we're going to fix nitrogen, supplement additional N right in the rooting zone when the crop needs it, and being able to supplement some of that nitrogen by replacing some of our inefficient pounds of nitrogen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, after a little bit of a technical difficulty here recording the podcast this morning, I'm going to be finishing up markets here from my home office. And as we take a look at markets this week, tariffs, of course, taking center stage as far as market impacts, in particular in the U.S. stock markets, which posted their largest drop since the pandemic earlier this week as fear roiled across Wall Street. In the overnight markets on Wednesday heading into Thursday, grains plummeted double digits, but recovered during Thursday's trading session to see just mild losses in corn and soybeans, and wheat even saw some small movements made to the upside. As we take a look at grains here on this Friday morning, as we're finishing up the podcast for today, grains are mixed across the board, with soybeans trading really largely to the downside. About 28 cents down in the May contract and about 26 cents lower in the new crop contract in November. Wheat is also trading lower here on this Friday morning across the board, anywhere from 7 to 11 cents in the hard red winter wheat market. So certainly seeing some long-term effect there from the tariffs that are going into place, of course, April 5th. As we take a look at the U.S. trade balance, those fresh numbers came out this week as well, putting February in again another massive trade deficit. As we look at the numbers for February, we did see the trade deficit rebound now to better negative numbers, but still sitting pretty negative nonetheless. Trade deficits showing for February a negative $122.7 billion in the month of February, meaning we imported way more products than what we exported. Now, this was above the average trade estimate, which had us at $123.5 billion negative trade. And it is certainly up from January's low, which showed a negative $130.7 billion. So certainly seeing some revisions there to our U.S. trade deficit. I know some folks that heard Secretary Rollins speak in Iowa earlier this week were noting some of those big numbers as well. And in her remarks, that certainly took center stage, pulling up just a couple of quick notes here about that. As I know, some folks were at that Ag Leaders Dinner where Secretary Rollins talked quite a bit about this huge trade deficit issue that we're seeing here. So as we look at trade deficits from the last administration on the last day of office over the couple of years there was about $176 billion in ag trade deficits. Secretary Rollins shared with ag leaders this week that the president's approach to trade moving forward really was going to be for more balanced trade deals. But she didn't go into too much detail about what those balanced trade deals would look like. So time will only tell, but she certainly is making her way across the U.S. as she continues to visit more groups and producers. And we'll be sure to cover all of those updates and more here on the Ag News Daily podcast. Next month, I'll be heading to Washington, D.C. to chat with Secretary Rollins and other ag policy leaders. So if you have any questions or burning things you want to make sure we get answered on the podcast, reach out to us. You can find us on every major social media site, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram. Shoot us a note and make sure we know what issues and topics you want to make sure we cover here on the podcast. But with that, we're going to wrap up another great week here on the Ag News Daily Show, and we'll see everyone here again next week.